Hello history buffs and welcome back to the channel. Last year at Christmas I looked into the history of Father Christmas. A link to that video is here. Today we're diving into the fascinating origins of his other half, Mrs Claus. While Santa has been around for centuries, his better half is a more recent addition to holiday lore. So let's explore how Mrs Claus came to be. The first appearance of Santa's wife in literature dates back to 1849. In a short story titled A Christmas Legend by James Rees, a Philadelphia-based Christian missionary. An old couple is described as weary travellers who turn out to be old Santa and his wife. This marks the beginning of Mrs Claus's journey into our holiday traditions. Guys, I'm really sorry if I sound a little bit hoarse, but I'm trying to fight off a cold. I just want to make sure that you have something to watch and you've got some content, so please bear with me. Just 2 years later, in 1851, Mrs Claus got her first mention by name. A student writer for the Yale Literary Magazine wrote about Santa Claus at a Christmas party, noting, "He seemed to have done his best, and we should think had Mrs Santa Claus to help him." This casual reference suggested that the idea of Santa having a wife was already becoming familiar to readers. Throughout the 19th century, Mrs Claus's character continued to develop and take shape. As more stories and references appeared, a clearer image of Santa's wife began to emerge. She evolved into the grand motherly figure we know today, often depicted as helping to run Santa's workshop in the North Pole. By 1878, Mrs Claus had gained more defined roles in Christmas stories. The late 19th century saw the emergence of Mrs Claus as a more defined character in children's literature. One notable work is Lil's Travels in Santa Claus Land and Other Stories, published in 1878. In this story, Mrs Claus is depicted as an integral part of Santa's operations, serving as both his helper and record keeper. She is portrayed sitting at a golden desk, diligently marking the behaviour of children while Santa observes them through a telescope. This portrayal highlights her role in the holiday preparations and emphasises her importance in the Christmas narrative. As the 19th century progressed, depictions of Mrs Claus began to reflect the societal expectations of women during that era. She was often shown as a hard-working partner to Santa, embodying the virtues of domesticity and nurturing. In various stories, she was celebrated for her practical skills and her managerial abilities, reflecting the essential roles women played in holiday preparations.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited to finally share something that I've been working on for months. My book, King Henry VIII and His 6 Wives. I have poured so much love into this project, working closely with my amazing illustrator to make it as vibrant and engaging as possible. It's full of fun rhymes and colourful pages that bring history to life. Because, let's face it, King Henry VIII and his 6 wives had some seriously dramatic stories. You'll meet 3 Catherines, 2 Annes and 1 Jane, and you'll finally nail that classic rhyme, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Whether you're a kid or a history buff just like me, or just someone who loves a good story, I think you'll love this book. It's been such a joy to create, and I can't wait for you to read it yourself. You can grab your copy now on Amazon, just click the link below, and if you do, let me know in the comments section below. I'd love to know what you think. Thanks for all your support, and happy reading!
The 20th century brought further expansion to Mrs Claus's character in literature. One significant work from this period is The Great Adventure of Mrs Santa Claus, published in 1923. This story presents her not just as a supportive figure, but as an active participant in Christmas festivities, showcasing her adventurous spirit and independence. Another notable contribution is How Mrs Santa Claus Saved Christmas by Phyllis McGinley, which further develops her character beyond the traditional confines of domesticity. In this narrative, Mrs Claus takes centre stage, demonstrating her resourcefulness and capability in ensuring that Christmas goes off without a hitch. For much of her history in popular media, Mrs Claus has been portrayed as a kindly, white-haired elderly woman. This traditional image often depicts her baking cookies or mending clothes, reinforcing her role as a nurturing figure within the Christmas narrative. Since 1889, she has typically been shown as a heavy-set, warm-hearted character, embodying the spirit of home and hospitality during the holiday season. In these portrayals, Mrs Claus is often seen working behind the scenes, contributing to the festive atmosphere, but still remaining secondary to Santa Claus. This depiction aligns with historical expectations of women in domestic roles, where her activities centre around caring for others and managing household tasks.
However, as societal norms have shifted, so too has Mrs Claus's role in popular media. In more recent portrayals, she is increasingly depicted as actively assisting in toy production and overseeing Santa's elves at the North Pole. This evolution reflects a broader cultural recognition of women's contributions beyond traditional domestic spheres. In various adaptations, Mrs Claus is shown taking on leadership roles within Santa's workshop, demonstrating her capability and importance in the holiday preparations. These modern interpretations highlight her as an equal partner to Santa Claus, showcasing her strength and resourcefulness alongside her caring nature. Now let's take a look at some of the most notable portrayals of Mrs Claus in film and television, which have helped shape her character in popular culture.
One of the earliest and most significant portrayals of Mrs Claus in animation comes from the classic Santa Claus is Coming to Town, released in 1970. In this special, she is introduced as Miss Jessica, who eventually becomes Mrs Claus. This character is depicted as a strong and independent woman who plays a crucial role in Santa's life, showcasing her as more than just a supportive spouse, but as an active participant in the Christmas narrative. The portrayal of Miss Jessica helped to establish a more dynamic view of Mrs Claus, setting the stage for future adaptations. In live-action media, Mrs Claus has been brought to life by several talented actresses, further expanding her character's depth. One notable performance is by Angela Lansbury in the 1996 film Mrs Santa Claus. In this film, Lansbury's portrayal presents Mrs Claus as a resourceful and adventurous figure who embarks on her own journey to spread Christmas cheer, breaking away from traditional depictions that often relegate her to the background. Another significant portrayal is by Elizabeth Mitchell in The Santa Claus 2, released in 2002. In this film, she embodies a modern interpretation of Mrs Claus, showcasing her as an integral part of Santa's operations at the North Pole and emphasising her role in maintaining the spirit of Christmas. Also, with her being a school teacher, she shows that she is a successful career woman and also the fact that she is a well-educated woman. A significant turning point for Mrs Claus came with the animated special The Year Without Santa Claus, which was released in 1974. This film was groundbreaking as it marks the first time Mrs Claus was portrayed as the main character. In this story, when Santa decides to skip Christmas due to feeling unappreciated, Mrs Claus takes charge at the North Pole. She sends two elves on a mission to revive the Christmas spirit, showcasing her determination and leadership. This portrayal not only elevated her status within the Christmas narrative, but also highlighted her as an unsung hero who works tirelessly to ensure the holiday's success. In recent years, Mrs Claus has continued to evolve with modern interpretations that emphasise her strength and agency. One notable portrayal is by Goldie Hawn in The Christmas Chronicle 2, released in 2020. Hawn's depiction presents Mrs Claus as a vibrant and capable partner to Santa, actively participating in the adventure alongside him. This version of Mrs Claus showcases a loving relationship that feels both realistic and relatable, appealing to contemporary audiences. Additionally, in the Disney Plus series The Santa Clauses, Elizabeth Mitchell reprises her role as Mrs Claus, further developing her character in a modern context. In this series, she is portrayed as a strong woman who balances her responsibilities at the North Pole while navigating family dynamics and holiday challenges. This portrayal emphasises that Mrs Claus is not just Santa's wife, but an essential figure in her own right, capable of handling significant responsibilities. Mrs Claus has been featured in various stories that take her beyond the traditional confines of the North Pole. These narratives often depict her in different settings, showcasing her ability to embark on adventures and engage with the world around her. For instance, tales have emerged where she travels to help those in need or participates in community festivities, emphasising her role as a compassionate figure who spreads joy beyond just Christmas Eve. These stories reflect a growing recognition of her character as an active participant in the holiday spirit rather than merely a supportive spouse. Mrs Claus's influence extends into everyday holiday culture, where she's represented in greeting cards, ornaments, and various holiday decorations. This representation has helped solidify her status as a beloved figure within Christmas mythology. Her image often embodies warmth, kindness, and the spirit of giving, making her a symbol of the holiday season that resonates with people of all ages. The evolution of Mrs Claus from a minor character to a beloved holiday icon reflects changing societal roles for women throughout history. Initially depicted as a background figure focused on domestic duties, she has transformed into a proactive character with agency and significance in Christmas narratives. Mrs Claus's journey mirrors broader cultural shifts regarding women's empowerment and representation, making her an enduring symbol of love, resilience, and community spirit during the holiday season. As she continues to capture the hearts of audiences worldwide, Mrs Claus remains an essential part of Christmas mythology and popular culture, reminding us all of the importance of kindness and generosity during this special time of year. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you really liked this video, then why not leave a super thanks? But until the next one, guys, have a wonderful day and have a Merry, Merry Christmas. Bye.